Thank you. The stream is live. StreamYard is live. Okay.
This is the Oregon Blossom, right?
And we are live. How are you doing, hon?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Oh my gosh, we've spent the entire day together.
I know. Wow.
We shouldn't get too mushy on this show. It's all about the beer, right?
Sure. Yes, dear.
And of course, you guys are watching Pardon My Fork. We are just waiting for a couple more people to join in, and then we will get this thing going. Tasting some awesome beers today.
Yeah. From Barsideous Brewing here in town.
Let me tell you, these two, not okay. Every single beer that they produce, I pretty much universally like. I mean, I'm not a huge like IPA person.
Yeah.
Their IPAs really are not that bad. I shouldn't say not that bad. They're good, you know, but I'm
just
not
our cup of tea.
It's not my glass of beer.
There you go. I like that.
But these two we're tasting today, holy smokes, they are amazing.
Yes.
So Bill actually should be joining us here shortly. Chris, the wine guy, is going to be joining us here shortly. And of course, you are watching Pardon My Fork.
Pardon my fork. Pardon my fork.
Pardon my fork.
Pardon my fork.
Pardon my fork.
Pardon my fork from Japan.
Pardon my fork.
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 Whether you're a home cook, a chef, a restaurateur, or just like to eat, we've got something for everyone. So grab a plate and get an extra helping. Food for thought and knowledge for life on Pardon My Fork. And welcome to Pardon My Fork. This is Andy.
And this is Cory Ann. It's nice to see you guys.
Sugar, what a day.
Oh, yeah. Lots of baby goats.
Lots and lots of baby goats.
Oh, yeah.
And going to be having some really incredible beers too. I am super, super excited. Speaking of excited, I am excited to see Chris, the wine guy. How are you doing, my friend?
Hi, Chris.
Doing pretty good. Good to see you all.
Man, I am super excited about these beers. Have you had a chance to taste them yet?
I have briefly, and they are delicious.
Aren't they
What did I
great?
tell you, my man? These things are primo. Bill, of course, should be joining us shortly to talk about his beers. Why don't we go ahead and pour some up, if you don't mind, lover?
Okay, so this one is Levi.
That one is the Little Steven.
Little Steven. Levi. Steven.
And you're going to have to tell me what we have in front of us, because you mentioned it earlier briefly, but yeah, I need to unravel it.
Oh, yeah. Well, so it's a very interesting beer, this Little Steven. It actually is a tribute to a lost customer of theirs. And I'll tell you, what a fitting tribute. When I die, you could do this for me, and this would be a true honor to my name, to make a beer this amazing.
You know, this is not the first brewery we've been to that made a tribute beer. Do you remember when we lived in Portland and we went to 4th Street Brewing?
Yeah.
That was our hangout, was 4th Street Brewing in Gresham. And
they had the most amazing, gosh, what was that? Imperial, I forget now, but they used golden raisins in it. And it gave it such an incredible flavor.
it was the golden, it was like the raisin deluge.
Yes, thank you. Raisin deluge. That's exactly what they called it. It was like a caramely, raisiny.
Was it a porter or a imperial? What was that?
It wasn't dark. It wasn't dark.
No.
I want to say it was like a Belgian triple.
But Deluche was the last name of, was it an employee or the owner's? It was a family member of the owner.
It was something like that, yeah.
And so they made this raisin deluge, and it was an incredible beer, but it was a very emotional beer for them to make.
Mm.
And when they were out of it, he would never make it again because it was for that family member. They were never going to do, but no matter what we did. The other thing that they did, which I've yet to find somebody do, was a chamomile wheat beer.
Oh, that's fun.
gosh,
My
yes.
mind.
Mhm.
It was so good. And I've never found any other brewery that has used chamomile in anything. So it's pretty exciting. So yeah, these beers, Andy had been kind of waiting for them and went out and found that they were on tap, ready to go. And, with the COVID, their hours are shorter. And so we could only go on Saturdays for like 4 hours to fill up a growler. So that was pretty exciting. So yeah, Chris, what did you think of them first time you tried them?
You know what? I had a brief, tiny little sip with dinner. We we had some homemade Asian food for dinner. It was shiitake mushrooms and chicken over some yakisoba noodles.
Nice.
And delish. But you're gonna have to tell me what the two beers are again, because when you came by to drop it off on the porch, all I heard was 2 beers, and I'm like, I gotta get back to work. So
okay, so the really really dark one is the little Steven. I got
Yeah,
Levi
Little
on the
Steven.
brain. Little Steven, and the other one is the Orange Blossom.
The Orange Blossom X. So the Little Steven, and Bill, when he gets here, he's going to explain it to us a little bit more. So this is a tribute beer, and it is a Russian Imperial Stout that is actually sitting in a barrel right now, a bourbon barrel. But they did do one, I believe it was a half keg or a corny of just the Little Steven by itself before it went into the barrel, obviously. And I got to tell you, it crushes. I mean, it's super good. Normally a Russian Imperial Stout, I expect it to be much more hoppy, a little bit more bitter, some bitter chocolate, those kind of flavors, but not quite as sweet as this is. And I don't want to say sweet like it's off-putting. I don't want anybody to think that it's like a super sweet beer, because it's not. But what it is just a really nice big stout. And honestly, I cannot wait for it to come out of the barrel.
Yeah, the barrel.
This is beautiful. It's got that kind of cocoa. It's very roasty. I agree with you. Not sweet at all. It's not your lactose milk stouts that kind of go really really sweet. This is a classic beer, and I'm very happy with it.
And then the second one is the Orange Blossom X. And that is brewed with cocoa nibs and orange peels, and it's a stout, correct? Yeah. And I love it. I would say if I was to guess, Andy's favorite is the Little Steven, and my favorite is the Orange Blossom of the two.
I'm torn between the two.
Really?
Yeah, I am.
Well, I was just...
And here, I apologize for looking down on my phone. I'm helping Bill work out some technical difficulties.
Oh,
yeah. Andy brought these home when I was making pickled asparagus. And so, I'm canning 50 pounds of asparagus. We've got hot brine going. We've got the canner going. I mean, the kitchen was like a sauna. It was like a sweatshop in there. And he brings home this growler of cold, delicious, amazing, chocolatey orange beer. And oh my God, so good. Down that first pint, it was delicious.
And it was funny for that day, and he told me that there was more cocoa nibs in the Orange Blossom X than they've ever done in the past. Boy, knocked that out of the park. I hope that's something they continue to do.
Yeah.
Now, I don't normally like how does my fiance Sarah put it? Stuff in my stuff. I like my beer to be beer. I like if I want to have chocolate, I'll go eat some chocolate, but I don't want a bunch of junk in it. And I will say that I do really enjoy this because those other flavors are very much playing a supporting role. You still taste the beer. I've had tea beers that taste like tea, and I'm like, well, I could just go have some tea if I wanted that, but I really kind of want a beer. And so this definitely, this definitely still speaks as a beer.
Mhm.
It has some mild hoppiness. It has that richness from the, you said stout or porter?
It's a stout.
I believe
Stout. And at the same time, there's a little that little essence of orange blossom. We've got definitely that cocoa nib, and I see that coming through a lot. It actually tastes like a little bit like one of those orange creamsicles, right?
Wow.
Mhm,
See, and
mhm.
I was thinking that chocolate orange you get during Christmas.
Oh yeah, that too. Yes,
Mhm.
yes, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I just got to get into this.
Yeah, dive into it. I'm sitting here seriously, my mouth is watering as we're talking about it. I'm just like, please, please,
Mm,
please.
this is so good. And a shout out to our cousin Coy because he got us a beer tasting board. So we're all official now. It's
Nice.
a lot of fun. Oh my god.
Now I've read some articles about growlers, and one of them was pretty inflammatory, and it was in I want to say it was in Sunset Magazine. It was in a respected publication, right? And it was saying that growlers were like the bane of existence of brewers, that they hated growlers because you couldn't control how the beer would be drank. A lot of people would get growlers, throw them in the back of your fridge, leave it there for a week, maybe pull a pint off of it, a night, leave it there for a few nights, yada yada, and compromise the beer. And my experience with growlers and brewers is that it really frees them from the expense. It lets them get the beer into people's hands and expand that experience to their homes instead of just at the brew pub for beers that maybe they're making super small lots. They don't make enough to can it.
Yeah.
I will say that do the brewer justice. You crack into a growler, polish that baby away. You've got a night, maybe two, and there's it's beer.
It's
Make it happen.
Beer.
I feel like we're pushing it a little bit because I did get these on Saturday because they're still doing that only open on Saturday, but we're still within that 2-day range.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be okay. And, we weren't opening these a bunch. We were just leaving them alone. So, I mean, all of those good things, right? But I don't think they've lost anything. Quite frankly, with beers this style, in my opinion, they don't really need that much in the way of carbonation, quite frankly.
You
I agree.
I do. I like cask beers. That's probably
And those cask conditioned ales.
Exactly. I don't know how people feel about cask aged beers. If you are listening or watching right now, please feel free to drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think about cask aged beers if you've ever had them before. Again, I don't have a problem with them at all. I think they're quite good. I think that bottle and cask conditioning beers is a really great way to go and a fun thing to do. Let's compare it to wine real quick. Let's imagine you have a wine and they're saying, oh yeah, in 5 years this is going to be drinking amazing. Well, if you have an Imperial IPA that just isn't quite your cup of tea, you can set it on a shelf for 6 months. You can set it on a shelf for a year. You could do 2, 3, 4 years, but just that 6 months to a year, that bottle conditioning time is really going to change that beer in so many ways. And I don't know. I just love it.
Now, go ahead.
We've had beers that were 5 to 10, 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a brewery in upstate New York and called Schmaltz Brewery. And we got some killer beers that were already over 5 years old. And then some we just put on the shelf. Like there's a Jubilation 12. It was a 12-year-old beer. And it was fabulous. And we opened it going, okay, fingers crossed. It was a little funky, but I also like wild farmhouse ales. So it was fabulous.
And wasn't that a wild ale?
It was a wild ale.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of meant to be that way anyways. We had a Schmaltz Brewing Jubilation, which they did this experiment basically where they They did 11 hops, 11 malts, 11. What was the other one? 11 something else.
Hops,
Malts,
malts,
something.
something. Wow.
Piper's piping. No.
Yes, exactly. And so you end up with this 11% beer, and they just continued doing it until I think they got to 21 or 22, and then they had to start over. But we had a jubilation, I believe it was a jubilation 14.
Yeah.
And it was at that particular point 9 years old. 10 years old, something like, I mean, it was old. I had a couple of brewers actually telling me, you better open that now because it's probably going to be the nastiest vinegar you've ever had.
It was delicious,
incredible,
amazing. It's just a fabulous flavor, lots of depth. It was great.
Hey, and speaking of incredible, we've got Bill here joining us. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, I made it. Oh, whoa. Doing well. Thanks for inviting me.
Bill, these beers, man,
knocked out of the park.
I'm super excited.
Oh, wow.
Super excited.
Excellent.
Thank you.
There.
I really appreciate that. Cheers. Yes, I've got the little Steve right here.
There we go.
Oh, that little Steve is so good.
Let's go ahead and start off with that, actually, shall we?
Yeah, tell us the story behind the little Steve.
Well, okay, so little Steve is it's a Russian Imperial Stout that was brewed to be put in a bourbon barrel, and in terms of our cooperage, we only have the one barrel, and it's 54 gallons. But in terms of our brewery, we brew 2.5 barrels, so we could only fit so much in, and we had this one keg left over, and so we decided, well, let's just have the non-bourbon barrel aged beer on, and the original beer is named Stephen, the bourbon barrel aged version. So around November, we're thinking we're going to be able to tap that one, and so you just have to sip Little Steve and imagine bourbon flavors later on and a slight boost in alcohol. So that's the story there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm happy with that idea. That's going to be fabulous. This is already fabulous, and then you add that next layer of fabulous.
Yeah.
That's going to
be
great.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
I will say I'm really excited to taste both versions. It's quite a treat to be able to taste two different versions of the same beer, and see the way that the brewer's hand has worked on it as it progresses. I've got to say I love this. I really love this where it stands, and I think I'm absolutely gonna love it. Gonna love it when it gets there. How do you decide? Which point to stop? Right?
Yeah.
Like, did you always make this to go in barrel?
Yes, this was designed specifically for a barrel because the fellow. So it's named after Stephen, who was one of our dear customers, but became a friend, and he was a beer representative for Blank Point, and he passed away in a car accident, and so we wanted to do something to remember him. And his favorite style of beer was big, bold, usually a stout, but a barrel-aged version. So he grew up in L.A., so we contacted his favorite brewery down there and kind of worked on this recipe together, and came up with a stout that would stand on its own, but would be something that could handle another layer of flavor on top of that without disturbing the balance. So, for example, so to answer the question about when, typically it depends on how fresh the barrel is. We lucked out, and we've got some good friends with Big Bottom Distillery in Hillsboro. And when they heard about the story of the beer, they offered to donate us a barrel. So we're using one of theirs, and I really like their bourbons and their rye whiskeys. we've had 2 of their barrels before, and right now we have on tap a version of our chocolate beer that was aged in the bourbon barrel for 9 months, and
I want that.
yeah.
I'm sorry, honey. They wouldn't let me take a growler home. Otherwise, you'd have some.
Yeah, no, yeah. We're going to actually, as we phase into phase 1 of reopening, we're going to move that chocolate one over to our nitro tap, and see how it does with nitro. But anyway,
Can I get a growler of that?
well, unfortunately, nitro doesn't do well in growlers. But
No.
yeah.
Sippy cup?
Oh yeah,
I can't wait to get that in a nitro. I'm a big fan of. You're hitting all of my buttons. The big chocolatey stouts, I'm a huge fan of. The barrel aged beers, I'm a huge fan of. On nitro, I'm a huge fan of.
Oh.
And let me tell you, I tasted that chocolate Casanova. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was an absolute knockout. And it's a little bit tart even. Can you tell me, I mean, is that because you're using kind of the sour cherries or the tart cherries?
Yeah, in that chocolate one, no. When so the real tell on that one is we had it on. So we had a keg on just regular CO2. And then we moved a keg over to nitro, and doing a little research on that. Depending on the blend of nitrogen you're using, it can pull out flavors like that.
Oh,
so the nitro's adding that little extra bit. Well, anyway, yeah. So yeah.
Right, and just for those at home, if you don't know about nitrogen force charged beer rather than CO2, the nitrogen bubbles are much smaller, and the way they interact with your tongue changes the flavor profile of what you're drinking. It really is ingenious, and it's something that Guinness has used for a long time. Still doesn't mean I like Guinness. I'll take some of your beer over Guinness any day of the week.
Any day. The texture, the consistency of a nitro beer is more creamy.
Yes.
Great.
So those tiny little bubbles give you a creamy feel when you drink it. It's not that it has cream in it, but the foam is very thick and condensed. So some people really prefer that, like my husband.
Oh yeah. Well, that particular one was a 30-70. So nitrogen for beer, when you do a nitro, it's always a blend of nitrogen and CO2. Typically, it's either going to be a 30-70% blend or a 25-75. And that was our first shot with it, and it was 20. We did 30-70%. But I really think in terms of just keeping the flavors balanced, we're going to switch over to the 25-75%.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of switching gears, since we've been sipping on the little Steven here, let's go ahead and move on to the expert, Chris. By the way, Bill, the wine guy, Chris, Bill.
Oh, hey.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
Chris, why don't you tell us what you're tasting here?
It's delicious, is what he's tasting.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the roasty flavors come first and foremost, right? You've got a little bit of that cocoa that we were talking about before. There's also a nuttiness as well underneath it all. I actually tasting this, and maybe it's just because it's fresh on my mind. Just the other day, I made browned butter brownies, and I put just a pinch of salt in there. They're not very sweet as far as brownies go. Threw some hazelnuts and similar flavor profiles. And actually, I see a lot of things in there that are similar. And I don't want to make it seem that the beer is sweet, because it's absolutely not. It's smooth. It's got that pleasant bitter finish there. Those hops kind of move through the palate with you. It's all all that roast and all that chocolate up front, and then the hops kind of build and carry through. Beautiful beer.
Now,
Mhm.
Chris, that
Oh, thank
the
you.
hop profile, it kind of helps build on that. Okay, so if your flavor complexity, let's just use that. It's a complex, right? It's a I don't know what word I'm looking for, but you're building a profile in your mind, right? So those hops, the way they build up at the end, it's almost like it's supporting what you would find in like a dark chocolate bar.
Yeah.
You know, an 85% cacao or something like that, where it's not exactly sweet. You definitely tell it's chocolate, but it's got that that nice bitterness on the kind of the back of the palate. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I could also see because my name's Wine Guy Chris. I could also see a supporting argument for tannins in wine, right? Those tannins carry the red wines through the palate, and I feel like the hops are really helping to support this in the same way. Just like a well-balanced dish is going to have the synergy of flavors that really carry it through the experience, instead of you add a little too much salt, or you've got your proportions off with your olive oil and vinegar when you're making the dressing, and it's a little much vinegar. I mean, these things can throw it out of whack, as opposed to where it all comes together and supports it, and they carry each other. I really enjoy dark beers, and especially with all this rain we've been having lately, absolutely love it. I will say that this being an imperial stout, sometimes in imperial stouts, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to call them out, but I'm thinking of even some of my favorites, that roasty flavor can come really fast up front in the palate, and that complemented with the higher alcohol can sometimes they can battle a little bit, and I don't see this at all in this, and so I'm really excited to see what happens with it in barrel.
Oh,
Bill,
yeah.
I'm curious, what hops did you use in this?
Actually, I was going to ask the same thing. I was curious.
Yeah.
We have been on the same page
yeah, we
all
have been.
day.
I was hoping you might be able to tell us kind of what your mash bill is for this thing. I'm pretty curious.
Well, the mash bill is very complex.
What it means is proprietary.
So that's a carefully guarded secret. No, the hops are real simple. It's a bittering charge of Warrior hops, and then I just finished it at 10 minutes with some Cascade, just some
nice.
good old fashioned Oregon Cascade hops.
Nothing wrong with that.
I love that. Wow.
Now, I'm not as familiar with Warrior hops as I am with the Cascade hops. Could you tell us a little bit about the flavor profiles between the two?
Well, the nice thing about Warrior hops is they have a really high alpha acid content. So they're right around, you can really count on them to be around 13-14%. So a little goes a long way. And they are typically very neutral in flavor and aroma. So they add that level of protection and that bittering charge that you want in your beers, but they also give you that kind of neutral balance where you can add in other flavors without having to really worry too much about how they're going to interact. Cascade, on the other hand, and that's why I finished with Cascade. Cascade and Centennial, Amarillo, those play so well together as long as you kind of do a nice little adjustment of combining them. Like Cascade and Centennial are really nice in IPAs if they're blended together in a charge. So instead of like separating them out, you add a couple of say 8 ounces of each, and at your 30-minute mark, and then finish off with Amarillo or something like that. So Warrior is just very nice and neutral. You can just use it and then play around with other things like the malt bill. That's why I like Warrior on this one, is because the malt bill is very complex, and I wanted it to all balance out in the finish.
So the
I
malt
see.
bill, can you talk about that a little bit more? Is that definitely proprietary?
Well, it's not proprietary, but okay. So we do a lot of dark beers, and each one of them is a bit different. The general malt bill is, it starts with 2-row with a stout. We throw in chocolate malt and roasted malt. This one I think has black patent in it, and this one has a dark Munich malt in it, and a Crystal 150. So it's just it's like you start with your basic stout, and then you just kind of layer in these other dark malt flavors, just to kind of intensive, just broaden out the flavors a little bit.
It's really interesting. If you ask kids that are, or kids, adults, even that are 10, 15 years younger than us, if when's the last time they had a chocolate malt and dipped their French fries in it, they've never had a chocolate malt. I'm like, what?
Seriously?
That is what it's all about. It's chocolate malts. It's fabulous. We need French fries.
So in this day of IPAs here, we hear a lot about the different hop profiles on beers. But even before the IPA craze, I don't know that there was a lot of talk about the malt bill on different beers. Do you think that that's just because the light hasn't been shined on it, or that people don't get it, or why is that? Do you think that we should be talking about the malt bill on beers more often?
Yeah, I actually I do. I think the malt, it's kind of like when you're painting. When you're an artist and you're painting a picture, it's like going from black and white to all those colors. The malt bill. Okay. So you opened a can of worms for me. My feeling is that when it comes to beer, we should be talking first about water profile, and then move into, and then the malt bill for sure, because that really is what you're designing the whole flavor profile around, and then you add in this kind of aura of hops to either support, So I want to say that in my mind, hops should be the supporting characters, not the main actors.
I think that's why I hate most IPAs, Bill, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
Not yours, obviously, but I'm just saying others.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's why we focus. Like we have several IPAs as well, and I'm very passionate about our IPAs, but our IPAs don't have they're a pretty full malt bill. You're going to find that the hops are there to support. Well, they're supposed to support each other and balance each other out. And they're all a little on the upper end of alcohol content. So, I think our lowest alcohol content, our IPA is 7.6 or something like that. Yeah. And
like a big IPA.
Yeah. But, and then you throw those hops in there to just round out and fill up the flavor. But you definitely need, when you're charging a beer with so much hop matter, you want the malt to be able to support all of that, so it just doesn't become this kind of grassy mess. I don't know. I do like the juicy IPAs that some breweries are making. Like Great Notion has just got some amazing, they're all over the place, but they're all very hazy and, for lack of a better word, juicy, but they're wonderful beers.
So I think we have a bit of a mission in the future here when we speak about beer more, is to dive into the malt bill a little bit more. And my goal with that is to understand what's going on in the beers, so that I can understand my own palate and what I like better. Right. Same reason that people, really love learning about the different hops and, noting which hops are being used in what way, whether it's dry hopped or not, or what have you. I think there's that same discussion could be had with malts as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As a follow-up, though, do you use the same yeast on the different beers? Should yeast be part of that discussion as well, or where does that sit with you and your brewery?
Okay, so we're small enough where we can definitely experiment with different yeasts, and so the Little Stephen was brewed with a particular strain of yeast that we borrowed from the brewery in LA, and it's called the Brewery. And that was their contribution. Besides the collaboration in thinking through, we did this. We just shot emails and texts back and forth, brainstorming different ideas to develop the malt bill. We typically so the yeast I believe is very important, and each yeast, depending on how it's treated during fermentation in terms of managing the temperature, will develop different flavors. So on the hot side, you're going to get certain flavors. On the colder side, you'll get other flavors, and then there's a sweet spot. And it just kind of depends on how you want it to play with the wort that you just stuck in there. So my feeling is yeast is very important to the flavor profiles, and we use 5 different strains or 5 different types of yeast for our different styles of beer. One of our IPAs actually uses a Belgian yeast to ferment out. We start with a Belgian yeast, and then we finish it with just the standard California ale yeast. But So yes, yeast is the other piece. So there's the water, there's the malt. You factor in the hop, what they're going to contribute, and then finally, what's the yeast going to add to it? It's either going to be neutral, or like with this one, the yeast was specifically selected for those dark fruit, dried fruit type things, like figs and raisins and dried cherries, and that they would probably come out more once they were aged in the barrel because of the oxidation that you get out of a barrel. Anyway,
right.
I actually think
long-winded way of saying yes, I agree.
I actually think those flavors are starting to come out in the glass a little bit. When I poured this, I poured it straight from the growler out of the refrigerator. Now that it's been sitting here for half an hour or 45 minutes, it's starting to get a little warmer. It's still chilled. It's still cool on the palate. But those other flavors, those dried fruits, I was actually thinking fig. Alongside when you were saying it, and
you know what, Chris, can I just say real quick, even the smell is developing the longer it's been out. Hey,
what a treat. Thank you.
You said word, by the way, fruit, and so I want to move on to our next one, which is something very special. This Orange Blossom X, Bill, you've got some splaining to do, son.
Do it again.
So this actually was a collaboration with our good friends at Conversion Brewing down the street from us.
Oh yeah.
Matt, the head brewer over there, he's very well versed on designing and executing Belgian style ales, and let's see, it was a year ago in February, so probably more a year ago. But it was a year ago in February that we got together and brewed this. But we had started brainstorming ideas for what we were looking for probably 3 months before that. And the idea was to go for a Belgian with hints of orange and chocolate. And our original idea was to bring it out in December around, make it a Christmas beer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But life and demands. By the time we got around to it, it was February. So I think we actually tapped it right around Valentine's Day last year, and kind of put it out as it's make this your love special. Anyway, so the basic design is a Belgian strong blonde. The original intent was for it to be around a 6%. But ours
and started coming back.
What's that?
You passed that mark and then started coming back.
Yeah. So okay. So Matt brought in the yeast and the hops for this, and then we split the grain bill. And when I pitched the yeast, I just followed his protocol on it, and when it hit our fermenter, it just ratcheted right up. And normally this was supposed to ferment out over 3 to 4 days, and it was like it kicked after 6 hours and just zoomed. And it was like 2 days. After 2 days, I had to start crashing it to bring it back down, and it finished out at 9%.
Wow.
It's delicious.
Here's the funny thing, though. This does not taste like some huge beer. This is not some big, difficult to drink beer. When I read on your board that this was 9%, I had already tasted it, and I was like, "Hang on, what? 9%?" Because it doesn't taste like it.
It's not hot at all. It's not sweet, but it kind of is on the palate. I loved it.
Now, what do you do? Is there orange peel, something like that goes in?
Right. So we used 2 pounds of orange zest in the boil. So that went in just before the whirlpool, and then we dry hopped with another 2 pounds of orange zest.
So I'm sorry. If you put this in during the boil, then that means that this actually has some orange oil, or orange essence,
right?
In it.
Oh,
right.
So good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That means it's healthy.
Hey, all beers are healthy.
And it's to keep COVID away.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, dear.
Oh, Chris. So where do the cocoa nibs come in?
Yes. So the cocoa nibs were so 10 days before we packaged it, we dumped, I think it was 3 pounds of cocoa nibs in it, which made it very challenging. So that was the original version. It made it very challenging to keg it out, because cocoa nibs, they sat down on the bottom and they just started, they would want to, they clog the line as we were kegging it out. So once we got through that mess, we decided that the next time around, we should try a different way of getting the cocoa nibs in there. And so I was doing some research, and I was talking to a naturopathic physician in Salem who suggested tinctures. So we made a tincture out of with the cocoa nibs, and that's why. So the first version was very clear. It looked almost like an IPA, and this version is darker because when you throw the tincture in, you're actually putting basically chocolate right into the beer, and so it comes out darker.
Now, how did you make your tincture?
I was sworn to secrecy on that because the doctor said that she would share with me only under the so anyway, it's her special thing. And anyway, so there you go.
So generally, when you're speaking about tincture, are you talking about it's something similar to like down the same vein of making bitters, but with less of a bitter component?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Just like that. Yeah.
We're just really soaking all of your secrets out here, Bill.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Apparently,
I love it. Fascinating.
that's okay. It's all. You know what? The great thing about the craft beer as community is we're just very collaborative. So it's hey, take it, use it. I would share it if it weren't for the fact that it was given to me with the assumption I'd be careful about putting it out there.
Oh, of course. I'm worried that you're starting to feel like Bruce Willis in Die Hard.
Well,
Come on to the podcast. Have a few laughs.
Right? Hey.
and that is a Christmas movie. If you don't agree with
It
me, you're
is.
wrong.
It is.
I agree. Mhm.
You know,
I'm on board.
Loving all the chocolate in this. You know, Andy recently got me brewable cocoa nibs, and so we've put them in the French press or sprinkled it on top in our normal drip coffee maker, and it's so good. So I'm just thinking, like, tincture of cocoa. This is in my life. Like, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't have it here, but I do want to give a real quick honorable mention to your Saint Misbehavin' and Saint Gregory. Those are dynamite beers, and that Saint Gregory especially. It's like a gingerbread stout. I know you guys don't call it that, but that's what it tastes like to me.
Oh, actually, that is what we call it.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. That's our gingerbread stout that we brew. We got so tired of pumpkin during the fall. We were, and pumpkin is just so difficult to work with. We thought, what's another great? And it was like, well, nobody's doing gingerbread. Let's do gingerbread. So that's our fall special. Yeah.
So dynamite. Buddy of mine that runs a show in Portland called the Unsophisticated Palate. He talks to wineries. He's from California, and so he has a bunch of shows with breweries and wines and stuff down there, but he lives part-time in Oregon, and I actually brought him down to do my show. If you recall, we recorded in your brewery.
Yes, right.
And, St. Gregory was still on, and it was kind of funny to me because I didn't tell him about the beers. I just laid them all out, and we tasted as we talked on his show. And when he got to the St. Gregory, I could tell he didn't like it. And so I made him stop. And he's like, all of these are really good, but this one, there's just something off about it. And I said, well, what's off about it is that you're drinking a gingerbread beer in like March. And he stops and he goes, it's gingerbread beer. And then he tastes it again. And he's like, oh, how did I not see that? And then we just moved on. But he wasn't prepared seasonally for that flavor.
Sure.
Whereas me, I mean, listen, I drink stouts in the winter and porters in the summer. Like, I love a dark beer.
Yeah.
So when I first tried your St. Gregory and it was March or April or whatever, I was like, oh, I need a growler of this.
Well, great. Yeah. I've always worried about, especially tap places that tell me that they can't carry stouts in the summer because
they're wrong.
Right. It's a seasonal. Yeah. And then I proceed to tell them that there is that style, that Jamaican stout. What that's a hot weather beverage. Let's step it up a little bit, guys. Yeah.
Sure, even Guinness. I mean, that's like a light dark beer. So
yeah.
All right, we're getting way off in the weeds here. We're needing to wrap up here pretty soon. But Chris, go ahead and give us your tasting breakdown for this bad boy.
You know what? This bad boy is bursting at the seams with that orange, but not in a bad way, right? I Bill, before you came on, we were talking about how I'm a real purist. I don't like stuff in my stuff, and I do enjoy this. It is much more in the vein of something that my beloved fiance would just adore.
That's because I love her.
I mean, I do too. She's amazing. But this is wonderful. I absolutely can finish a pint of this and not feel overwhelmed by the other flavors there. Very complimentary, and I see that as a theme in your beers. Instead of getting too deep into this, though, what I'd like to do is, Bill, I know that we kind of started the show and then had you join. Could you tell a little bit about your brewery? Give us the 30-second pitch of where you are, why you're doing it, and how you got there.
Oh,
Sure.
yes.
Well, we're on Main Street in Lebanon, right next to the famous Kuhn Theater. We're in the very first movie theater built in Lebanon in 19. The date on the wall is 1905, so we're trusting that. We got to that place because so I actually live in Portland. And my brother and I grew up. My brother lives in Lebanon, and we both grew up in Lebanon. And he still has the family acreage out on Cascade Drive by Sodaville. And we both have a similar ailment, and we'd meet once a month to compare doctor's notes. And we were doing breweries, and so we would meet in Portland because he'd have appointments up here, and then we'd meet down there because I'd have appointments in Salem. We just get, and we come, and then my sister, who also grew up in Lebanon, her two sons, Brian and Aaron, they started joining us, and because they're very big on beer, and we started talking beer and eventually they started coming to my house where I have a brewery in the garage, and 4 taps, and we'd just start. Yeah, exactly. And so we'd start talking, and let's start a brewery. And so but before that, we were very cautious. We did a couple of beer festivals, and the last one was the Corvallis Beer Festival. And the beer, just to see how the beer would go, and it was pretty positive. It was so positive, we just kind of went for it, and that's where we are. And I missed two parts of the question. What were the other 2 parts?
No, I think you're great. I was just kind of rambling. So tell us how the name came about.
Oh yeah, so the name. Oh yeah, so the name's kind of weird. So the name is Bartman. And so I was a band teacher for 33 years, and in my last job in Oregon City, the kids would we like to say affectionately give me nicknames, and a few of them were like the Bartnator and Barticus and B-Bomb, things like that. And then my colleagues started giving me nicknames, and about the year the Darth Sis Star Wars came out. Yeah. One of my colleagues photoshopped a little cowl and made me look like the Darth Sith, and gave me the nickname Barsideous. So there's Bartman, which goes back to the Simpsons reference, and then there's this Star Wars thing, and then he slammed those 2 things together. Another good friend of mine was at the time he was. We were sharing beers, and he's a graphic artist, and he just started making artwork to go with the different beers. And then he said, "Well, we need a name," and I didn't have one. And he said, and he just threw Barsideous on there, and it stuck. So
that's great.
Anyway,
that's kind.
I love that. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I can't tell you how happy I am that you're in Lebanon. You guys, your beers absolutely crush. I love everything about them. If there's one place to get my beer, it's definitely Barsideous first. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on, man.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for the props and the opportunity to talk about beer. I love that.
Absolutely, my brother.
Thank you, Bill.
We are going to let you go, and we're going to wrap up the show. But once again, thank you so much, and cheers.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
Should have some beer.
Oh yes, you should have some. Oh, Chris,
Mhm.
I know, it's
she
bad luck,
didn't
bad
have
luck, it's
beer
bad
when we
luck.
cheers.
Bad luck.
So hold your glass up. Hold it up.
Whoa.
Now we're on.
Okay,
Now we're on.
okay.
We're going to talk about cheersing in a future show
Mm.
and all the myths, legends, and history around it.
Something about
Ooh.
if you cheers with an empty glass and you don't take a drink, it's like bad sex for 7 years or something like that.
I have lots of fun facts about stuff like
I just
like
made that.
Way to pivot there, Andy.
well, like race car drivers spraying the champagne bottle. There's a very specific moment, and it was actually a giant FU to a particular country. We're going to get into that sometime. I'm excited for that episode where we kind of go through myth and lore about drinks. Chris.
Ooh, on a champagne episode.
Oh yeah.
Yay, let's do that sometime.
I like that.
love-
Absolutely. So I recently as in like a few hours ago, purchased on eBay a French Revolution era saver
Oh,
to savor champagne at my wedding. So yeah, 200-year-old 200-year-old saber that I'm gonna
of course you
savor
bought
the champagne with
saver
at my
for
wedding.
champagne. Yes.
We need COVID gone. I want to come over to your house so we can save
Right.
the backyard. All right. Hey,
So
whoa. We're getting way off base here.
way off base. Let's dial it back in. That's a future episode. We're gonna have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
And absolutely, sir.
We've got 5 minutes left. I want first Chris and then Cory Ann. Final thoughts about these two beers that we've had tonight.
Okay, so the little Steven, crap. Oh my god.
The little Steven, yeah.
Little Steven. I totally want to have that with like a bean and cheese burrito. I don't even know why, but like a black bean, not pinto bean. But that's that. I don't know why that's what I want. Maybe it's Mexican food. I don't know. I love Mexican food.
I think what she's trying to say is she'd take a little bit of chili in that stout.
Or put that stout in chili.
Or that. Oh, you know what? That stout would go really well in shepherd's pie, quite frankly.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, so okay, you jumped in. What are your final thoughts on these two beers?
I love them. In fact, I like the Little Steven more now that honestly, I think Chris really hit it on the nose that it's had some time to sit in a growler, in the fridge, in the glass, oxidation, warming up. I like the flavors. When you brought them home the first time, I was like cranking out pickled asparagus, hot and sweaty in the moment. And what really killed the palate or was really killed the moment was great on the palate was the orange blossom for me.
Because there's a like a refreshing
Yes.
aspect to it, surprisingly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it was just what I needed. But now it's been a rainy day. We've been out with the goats. We worked in the garden, did some harvesting of early spring vegetables, all of that. And you know what? The Little Steven was perfect. And I love it. So it's great. I'm really impressed.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
So there's a lot to love here with these beers. And my first thought is, when can I get out there and try the rest of their lineup?
Right.
And it's clearly going to be a little bit, but hopefully not too long. But when can I get out there and taste the rest of their lineup? Because they're doing something right. They've really got some great stuff figured out. If if this is what we came home with, and both of these just knock it out of the park. The Little Steven is definitely more my vein. It's more classic. It's very well put together. The orange cocoa beer. What was the name on this?
Oh, Orange Blossom X.
Oh, there you go. Orange Blossom X.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna throw this out here real quick. Orange Blossom X is a perfect name. They should have let it go to 10% alcohol, and that would have made perfect sense.
Oh,
yes. Yes. And I think that it could have supported 10%, to be honest. The alcohol does not show. And it's very, very, very well integrated. It's very smooth. It really the different flavor components come together very well. Little Steven's got my heart, though. This is all me here, baby.
This is why you and Andy are like best friends.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. My feeling is they're two very different beers
Mhm.
and they have their own things going on, and the reason why I wanted to taste these two is one, they just came on. They're beers that I find are highly unusual, and I'm pretty fairly often beer drinker. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I got a bottle of Dragon's Milk in the fridge. We just polished off a bottle of Wild Ride Nut Crusher, the peanut butter stout, or is it peanut butter porter, whatever it is. Corian got a couple.
Yeah.
And so I have a pretty eclectic beer palate, as we were talking about in the first part of the show. But these two beers caught me off guard, and that's why I wanted to taste them. It's not that they're a direct comparison to each other,
Mhm.
but it's because they're two incredibly unique beers in a lineup of incredibly unique beers at a brewery that in and of itself is one of the most unique places that I've ever been to. And I'm with you. They both stand alone. The Little Steven, I give 100% props to, but just right now in this moment, this Orange Blossom X is hitting all of the boxes for me. I've never really heard of a strong blonde ale, Chris, but I got to tell you, man, I'm dying to make one of my own now.
You
Oh,
like
yeah.
strong blonde, don't you?
No,
Oh my God.
actually.
Just throw that in there.
Wow.
Wait, we got it.
That's what she said.
There it is.
It is truly what she said. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really love about beer is the experimentation and camaraderie in the industry, right? Collabs you hear about a lot. These are not just marketing things. These are real things, saying someone calling someone else up saying, "Hey, I love what you're doing. I want to do something with you. Let's make it happen." And I absolutely adore that. Here in COVID right now, we are really trying to support our local economy, and I have a local beer only rule. So right now, if we're drinking beer, it's going to be local beer, and local, sometimes you can kind of expand that. How local do you want to say? Do you want to say, somewhere in your neighborhood, or do you want to say somewhere in your general larger area, somewhere in your state? Define what local is for you. But I gotta say, a lot of beer comes out of Milwaukee. All kind of taste the same. There's some winners over there. I can talk to you about that later. But really, the things that people are experimenting with, the things that are defining the industry for most of us, they're all local.
Yeah.
Go get it.
100%.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood,
It
and
is.
that's why you need to come down to Barsideous Brewing.
Mhm.
You guys, this has been a really great one. I'm so glad that Bill could join us. I cannot thank him enough for coming on. And of course, Chris, I cannot thank you enough for being here, my friend. You are always a welcome addition to the show, and I thank you for that. Honey, good job.
Love you.
Crushing it. This has been wildly impressive, but boy, we've got some really impressive stuff coming up. We've got drinks from Spiritopia. We have the second bottling of something that no one's ever seen before, which is a ryegrass whiskey. I did get you a bottle, so we'll get you that.
Nice.
We've got wines coming up. What is our wine selection that's going to be coming up in the next couple episodes?
Yeah, we've got to decide. I've got a lineup of some very bright and fresh white wines. We have some things from Piedmont in Italy there, and oh gosh, there was a third. Budget bubbles. Not necessarily super budget, but affordable bubbles. We've got some bubbles from France and Spain.
I love it. And that's going to pair the budget bubbles we did from a little place known as Fred Meyer's a couple of weeks ago.
Local. We're trying to balance the local and worldwide, but still with our theme of small batch.
That's right.
So made in a small area by small developers, family owned, family friendly, budget friendly. So we can really help kind of take you new places you've never been on the show.
That's right. And hopefully encourage you to buy something out of your element. I'm looking at Riojas. wines
I
now, thanks to you.
know.
So there's lots of stuff to learn, lots of stuff to see here on Pardon My Fork small batch edition. So we thank you guys for tuning in for that. We thank you for telling a friend about it. It really is, how we keep this whole thing going. And I like the numbers we're seeing, and I hope that we can continue to provide that level of entertainment for everybody. So listen, for Bill and for Cory Ann and for Chris, I want to thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And for Bill, Cory Ann, and Chris, this is Andy, and we will see you next time.